You don't belong here. Hand over those keys now.
Brenda Hartwell, our HOA president, stood in my grandfather's cabin doorway, designer boots crushing pine needles, demanding keys to property my family owned since 1963. Not happening. Her smile turned ice cold.
Keep those keys then, but I'm calling the police.
So I kept them. 20 minutes later, deputies knocked on my door. She'd reported me for illegally possessing stolen keys to my own inherited property. Had to show deeds and probate papers while neighbors gathered to watch the show. Calling cops on a man for keeping keys to his own house? Unbelievable. But here's the thing. I'm an electrical contractor who builds military-grade security systems. When someone calls police because I won't surrender my family's keys, I install locks that make her regret ever asking. This Karen's harassment became federal charges. Drop your state and worst HOA nightmare below. I want to hear how deep this corruption goes. My name's Miles Blackwood, and I've spent 23 years wiring security systems for people who don't trust the world. Ranchers protecting cattle from rustlers, tech millionaires guarding trade secrets, the occasional paranoid survivalist with more guns than sense. But the property that mattered most wasn't some client's fortress. It was Grandpa's mountain cabin in Pine Ridge, Colorado. He built that place with his own hands back in 1963. 40 acres of pristine wilderness bordered by national forest with a crystal-clear trout stream where you could count pebbles on the bottom. The cabin was pure old-school craftsmanship, hand-hewn logs from trees he felled himself, stone foundation quarried from the mountainside, and an off-grid solar system we installed together when I was 16 and thought I knew everything about electricity. Every childhood summer meant 3 months in his workshop, breathing sawdust and motor oil while he taught me that anything worth having was worth protecting. "Son," he'd say, adjusting his wire rim glasses, "locks keep honest people honest. But dishonest folks? They require more creative solutions." His weathered hands could fix anything. Engines, electronics, or entitled neighbors who got too big for their britches. When Grandpa passed last year at 91, the inheritance was straightforward: clean probate, taxes paid, deed properly transferred. I owned 40 acres of paradise worth roughly $800,000. No mortgage, no liens, no complications. Just mountain air that tasted like freedom and 60 years of memories soaked into every log. 3 months later, I was up there replacing weathered deck boards when gravel crunched under tires like bones breaking. A silver Mercedes SUV pulled into my driveway and outstepped Brenda Hartwell like she owned the place. I'd seen her around town, silver bob styled to perfection, designer hiking gear that screamed "I paid retail," always clutching official-looking paperwork. She'd moved from Denver about 5 years ago, fleeing some high-stress corporate law career, and bought herself a $2 million mansion in Pine Ridge's gated section. Within 6 months, she'd gotten herself elected HOA president and had been terrorizing the community ever since. The morning mountain air carried pine needles and wood smoke from my chimney. Birds chirped in old-growth trees Grandpa had protected for decades. Everything was peaceful, perfect, exactly how a mountain retreat should feel. "Mr. Blackwood, I presume?" Brenda marched up my porch steps in spotless hiking boots, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "I'm here about your property compliance violations." I set down my hammer, wiping sawdust from my hands. "What violations?" She flipped through papers with theatrical importance. "Your cabin violates our aesthetic standards. That rustic log exterior is completely inconsistent with community guidelines. Solar panels are eyesores, and don't get me started on that ancient pickup truck you leave parked outside." The diesel smell from her Mercedes mixed with clean mountain air like pollution in paradise. She stood on my grandfather's hand-built porch, threatening his life's work with fabricated rules. "Lady, this property predates any HOA by decades. My grandfather built this when your gated community was still wilderness." Her smile never wavered. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. The Pine Ridge Homeowners Association has full jurisdiction here. You have 60 days to comply. Estimated cost is $45,000, 45 grand to fix a cabin that was perfect exactly as it was. And if I don't, lien placement and forced sale to recover compliance costs. That's when I should have recognized this wasn't about aesthetics. This was the opening move in a systematic land grab that had already destroyed other families. But I was still thinking like a reasonable person dealing with an unreasonable neighbor. "Get off my property," I said quietly. Brenda's smile turned predatory. 60 days, Mr. Blackwood. Clock's ticking." As her Mercedes disappeared down the mountain road, I stood breathing crisp air and listening to water babble over stones. Grandpa's workshop wisdom echoed in my memory. Dishonest folks require creative solutions. Time to get creative. I should have seen Brenda's next move coming. But honestly, even after 23 years dealing with entitled clients who think money buys them immunity from physics, I underestimated just how dirty she'd fight. Tuesday morning, I was threading electrical conduit at the Henderson construction site when my phone buzzed. Sheriff's Department. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth. "Mr. Blackwood, Deputy Rodriguez here. Need you to come down regarding a theft report." "Theft of what?" "Keys to a cabin that allegedly doesn't belong to you." Every hammer stopped mid-swing. 20 construction workers suddenly found their boots fascinating while I stood there watching my reputation implode. In small mountain towns, your word is your bond. And Brenda had just tried to shatter mine with one phone call. The sheriff's station interview room smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken promises. Deputy Rodriguez, decent guy, local born, the kind who'd rather be fishing than dealing with manufactured drama, slid papers across the scarred metal table. "Look, Miles, this is obviously garbage. But when someone files theft charges, we're required to investigate. This Hartwell woman claims you forged inheritance documents and that your grandfather's cabin is actually community property. I'd learned years ago that inheritance fraud carries federal penalties up to 20 years if prosecutors can prove intent. Smart contractors always maintain paper trails. I pulled out photos of every deed, probate filing, and notarized document proving my legal ownership." Rodriguez studied my phone screen and sighed. "Figured as much. Problem is, the accusation's now on public record. Even when we clear you, and we will, that stink lingers in a small town." Pure genius, actually. Brenda wasn't trying to get me arrested. She was assassinating my character and planting seeds of doubt about my integrity. Vicious, effective, and completely illegal. That weekend, I became a courthouse basement regular. Fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets overhead, while I breathed stale air and mainlined terrible coffee, hunting through property records that hadn't seen daylight since disco was popular. My back ached from hunching over filing cabinets older than I was, but persistence paid off. Most people don't realize that Colorado law requires HOA charters to renew every 25 years, a bureaucratic detail that trips up amateur land grabbers. Pine Ridge's original 1962 charter had expired quietly in 1987, making Brenda's enforcement authority about as legitimate as monopoly money. But the real smoking gun came from cross-referencing property sales. Mountain Vista Development, a shell company, had been acquiring mountain properties at below-market rates, properties that had mysteriously developed compliance violations right before their desperate owners sold. The registered agent? Rick Donovan, contractor and Brenda's live-in boyfriend. Monday morning, I filed my legal counterattack. Harassment charges, filing false police reports, conspiracy to commit fraud. I requested restraining orders and damages for business interference. The filing fee was $300, cheap insurance against future harassment. But Brenda escalated immediately. Frank Kowalski called that afternoon, voice tight as over-torqued wire nuts. "Marcus, emergency HOA meeting tonight. She's spreading rumors you're dangerous, unstable, made threats against elderly residents. Half the neighborhood's afraid to check their mail." The community center was packed tighter than a junction box with too many circuits, 43 residents on folding chairs, tension thick enough to cut with wire strippers. Brenda commanded the front like a general addressing troops, every silver hair perfectly styled, designer blazer projecting authority she didn't legally possess. This individual has demonstrated erratic behavior and made direct threats against community safety, she announced, gesturing toward an empty chair where I supposedly should have been begging forgiveness. We have documented evidence of unstable conduct. That's when Frank stood up, his tool belt jangling like wind chimes. What documented evidence? I've known Miles Blackwood 15 years. Only erratic behavior I see is you filing false police reports against honest people. 3 neighbors nodded agreement. Tom Bradley, a disabled veteran, cleared his throat. She hit me with bogus accessibility violations last month, demanded $8,000 for a ramp I already had. Sarah Mitchell, elementary school teacher, raised her hand. Same here. Fake septic compliance issues. When I asked for documentation, she threatened foreclosure. Turns out Brenda had been systematically extorting special assessments for years. Fabricated fees totaling over $180,000 flowing directly into Mountain Vista development accounts. Then came the moment that changed everything. Eleanor Denver, a 73-year-old widow whose husband had died 6 months earlier, quietly approached me as the crowd dispersed. Her weathered hands trembled as she pressed a manila folder against my chest. She destroyed my family too, Eleanor whispered, tears reflecting street light through the community center windows. Harold fought her fake septic violations for months. The stress gave him a heart attack. He died thinking he'd failed me financially. But I kept copies of everything. Every forged document, every illegal fee demand, every lie she told. Inside that folder was a systematic paper trail spanning 5 years. 6 families targeted. 6 mountain properties stolen through fabricated compliance schemes. Every victim was vulnerable. Elderly couples, disabled veterans, single mothers, anyone Brenda considered easy prey. This wasn't personal harassment anymore. This was organized crime, wearing a homeowners association mask, and I was staring at enough evidence to bring down the entire operation. Brenda's response to my legal filing was swift and typically underhanded. She couldn't attack me directly anymore. Restraining orders have a way of cramping a bully's style, so she deployed what I like to call the death by 1,000 paper cuts strategy. It started with the unmarked trucks. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., white contractor vehicles materialized at my driveway's end like mechanical vultures. No company logos, no identification, just guys in hard hats with clipboards pretending to survey my property. They'd take photos, measure distances, and make their presence known while staying just outside the legal definition of trespassing. The diesel exhaust would linger in the crisp mountain air long after they vanished, a mechanical stench polluting Grandpa's pristine valley. I immediately upgraded my security system, installing professional-grade motion sensors and infrared cameras with license plate recognition. Every vehicle, every face, every suspicious movement was now being documented and automatically backed up to cloud storage. In my line of work, you learn that the best defense is bulletproof documentation. Thursday morning brought escalation with an official county vehicle parked in my driveway. Inspector Dale Hoffman emerged, 30-year veteran who'd seen every building code violation imaginable and a few that defied the laws of physics. Morning, Miles. Sorry to bother you, but someone claims your solar system poses a fire risk to neighboring properties. The morning sun caught dewdrops on spider webs stretched between fence posts, nature's daily reminder that some things still made sense in this increasingly insane situation. Dale and I walked the property together, him methodically checking every panel connection and grounding system. Your grandfather's work is museum quality, Dale said, running weathered hands along 60-year-old conduit that looked better than most modern installations. Your solar upgrade exceeds current code by 20%. Whoever filed this complaint is either legally blind or professionally dishonest. What most people don't realize is that bogus safety complaints can trigger emergency inspection protocols that bypass normal due process. a bureaucratic loophole designed for genuine emergencies but easily exploited by those who understand the system. The takeaway? Always document your compliance above and beyond minimum requirements. Off the record? Dale's voice dropped to a whisper. This is the 6th fabricated complaint this month, all targeting mountain properties, all from the same source. Something stinks worse than a backed-up septic tank. That afternoon, my upgraded cameras captured gold. The same white trucks surveying my property were now actively cutting fence lines and dumping construction debris near my stream. One camera got crystal-clear footage of Rick Donovan directing his crew to scatter trash strategically designed to look like environmental violations. I started building a digital evidence library, cataloging every incident with timestamps, GPS coordinates, and cross-referenced license plates. Frank Kowalski, who'd quietly revealed his background as a retired FBI forensic accountant, helped me organize the documentation properly. Friday brought another official visitor. Jerry Walsh from the power company looked embarrassed approaching my electrical meter. Marcus, we got an emergency report about illegal connections threatening grid stability. Corporates demanding immediate inspection with service disconnection if violations exist. The irony was delicious. Someone claimed my grandfather's meticulously legal electrical system, which I'd personally upgraded to exceed modern codes, was somehow dangerous to the regional power grid. Jerry spent an hour checking connections, measuring loads, reviewing permits. This is certifiably insane, he muttered, tapping his multimeter like it might reveal hidden sanity. Your system's cleaner than the county courthouse. Whoever reported this couldn't identify a neutral wire if it bit them on the ankle. Anonymous complaints to utility companies can trigger immediate service disconnection under emergency safety protocols, another bureaucratic weapon perfect for harassment campaigns. Meanwhile, my weekend research into Mountain Vista development revealed the scope of the conspiracy. Property records showed every mountain cabin forced to sell due to compliance issues was purchased by the shell company at 40 to 60% below market value. Rick's crew would perform minimal cosmetic upgrades, then flip properties to Denver buyers for full market price within months. But here's where it got really interesting. Cross-referencing county inspection records showed that every bogus complaint had been filed through the same administrative pathway, a process that bypassed normal verification procedures and went straight to emergency investigation status. Someone inside the county system was facilitating the fraud. Eleanor Denver provided another piece of the puzzle when she showed me her husband's files. 3 other families had been targeted using identical tactics: fake violations, emergency inspections, forced sales, all processed through the same county administrator, Deputy Building Inspector Janet Morse, who happened to be Rick Donovan's sister-in-law. Tuesday at 2:17 a.m., my security cameras caught the smoking gun. Rick Donovan's crew returned with a different mission. Instead of dumping trash, they were carefully placing small plastic bags near my electrical panel and solar inverters. The infrared footage was cinema-quality clear. They were planting evidence. 24 hours later, an anonymous tip reached the sheriff's department claiming suspicious chemical odors from my property suggesting possible illegal drug manufacturing. Brenda's endgame was crystallizing. If fake building violations couldn't force me out, criminal allegations would trigger immediate property seizure under asset forfeiture laws. But she'd made one crucial miscalculation. My security system had recorded everything. My evidence was professionally documented, and unlike her previous victims, I understood exactly what game she was playing. Time to flip the board. Brenda's next move proved she was either getting desperate or had seriously underestimated how dirty she was willing to get. Probably both. It started with social media warfare that would have impressed a political campaign manager, if political campaigns specialized in character assassination and property theft. Tuesday morning, my neighbor Tom Bradley called with his voice tight as piano wire. "Marcus, you need to see what's happening online. Brenda's created a Facebook group called Pine Ridge Community Safety, and it's blowing up like a meth lab." I pulled up the page on my phone and felt my stomach drop faster than a lead balloon. professional quality posts with manipulated photos showing my cabin as some kind of fortified compound. My security cameras had been photoshopped to look like military surveillance equipment. Even my grandfather's old workshop was labeled as a potential weapons cache. The comment section was a dumpster fire of manufactured outrage. Anonymous accounts spreading rumors about dangerous activities and threats to neighborhood children. The smell of coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I scrolled through post after post painting me as some kind of mountain hermit terrorist plotting the overthrow of suburban civilization. But the real masterpiece was a video compilation of security footage from around my property. Edited to remove context, it showed me in what appeared to be threatening poses, raising a hammer. I was building a birdhouse, carrying electrical wire, routine maintenance, and walking my perimeter at night, checking for the vandalism that was actually happening. Social media manipulation can destroy reputations faster than actual facts can rebuild them. A digital age reality that makes documentation absolutely critical for protecting yourself. Within 6 hours, the post had been shared 47 times and generated over 200 comments from people who'd never met me but were suddenly convinced I was a clear and present danger to society. Wednesday brought the inevitable escalation. Sheriff's deputies knocked on my door at 7 a.m., badges glinting in the morning sun that filtered through pine needles overhead like nature's own polygraph test. Mr. Blackwood, we've received multiple reports of concerning behavior. Anonymous calls claiming you've made threats against elderly residents. Deputy Martinez looked uncomfortable delivering the message, his uniform stiff with the awkwardness of investigating obvious bullshit. Look, we know this is probably more harassment, but when we get multiple calls about potential violence, we're legally required to investigate. The beautiful irony? While Brenda was painting me as unstable, my security system was documenting her boyfriend's crew attempting to break into my tool shed. The infrared cameras caught them trying to jimmy the lock at 3:17 a.m. Wednesday, then scattering like cockroaches when the motion-activated floodlights triggered. Thursday morning brought a phone call that made my blood run cold enough to freeze antifreeze. Mr. Blackwood, this is Janet from Mountain View Insurance. I'm calling about the immediate cancellation of your homeowner's policy. My coffee mug hit the kitchen counter like a gavel delivering a death sentence. Cancellation? Why? We've received reports of high-risk activities on your property that violate our safety guidelines. The policy is terminated effective immediately. False reports to insurance companies can trigger immediate policy cancellation under corporate risk assessment protocols, a vulnerability most property owners never consider until it's weaponized against them. The takeaway? Always maintain detailed documentation of your actual activities versus any false allegations. That afternoon, Frank Kowalski stopped by with bourbon and bad news. We sat on my grandfather's porch, breathing mountain air that tasted like freedom while Frank delivered intelligence from his retired law enforcement network. "It's bigger than we thought," Frank said, voice barely above a whisper, as evening shadows stretched across the valley like reaching fingers. Brenda borrowed over $2 million against future mining profits. Your refusal to sell isn't just inconvenient, it's threatening her entire financial house of cards. Friday brought the violation that transformed annoyance into pure rage. I was installing additional cameras when glass shattered behind the cabin. Racing around back, I found Rick Donovan's crew vandalizing my grandfather's memorial garden. They'd smashed the stone monument over his favorite fishing spot and were scattering garbage throughout flower beds he'd planted 60 years ago. The white-hot fury hit like lightning, striking twice. This wasn't about money anymore. They were desecrating family memory for profit. But then something beautiful happened. A young contractor, barely out of high school, started arguing with Rick's crew. "This is too far, man. We're supposed to harass him, not destroy family stuff." The kid walked away, leaving Rick screaming threats. 3 hours later, he appeared at my door with a manila envelope. "I can't do this anymore. Brenda's been paying us to plant evidence, fake violations, intimidate families. I got copies of everything. Contracts, payments, target lists. She's planning something big this weekend. Inside was proof of systematic criminal conspiracy spanning 5 years. But the last document made my hands shake. A forged county condemnation order scheduled for Saturday morning, followed by immediate property seizure. Game time. Saturday morning, I was drowning in evidence that could topple a criminal empire when I stumbled across the document that changed everything and made me understand why my grandfather always smiled when he talked about leaving me something special. The manila envelope from my whistleblower had mixed with my own research files, creating a paper avalanche across Grandpa's workbench. As I sorted documents that smelled like old leather and motor oil, a faded survey slipped out from between insurance papers. The letterhead read, "Blackwood Mining Survey, 1961, and my hands trembled like I'd grabbed a live wire. It was Grandpa's original geological assessment, commissioned before building the cabin. Standard procedure for mountain construction back then. Nobody wanted their foundations sinking into unstable soil. But buried in technical jargon that would cure insomnia was a paragraph that made my coffee taste like liquid gold. Subsurface analysis indicates significant rare earth mineral deposits consistent with regional lithium, cobalt, and tantalum concentrations. Estimated extraction value pending market development. Rare earth minerals. The stuff that makes every smartphone, electric car battery, and wind turbine possible. Materials China had been strangling supply of, driving prices higher than a hippie at Woodstock. My laptop fired up with the enthusiasm of someone about to discover buried treasure. Cross-referencing current market prices with the survey's deposit estimates, conservative calculations put my 40 acres underground value at over $50 million. $50 million. Sitting beneath Grandpa's fishing holes and bird sanctuaries like nature's own lottery ticket. But the real revelation hit when I connected dots that should have been obvious. Mountain Vista Development hadn't just been stealing properties, they'd been systematically acquiring mineral rights throughout Pine Ridge. During foreclosure sales triggered by manufactured violations, mineral extraction rights were quietly transferred to shell companies controlled by Brenda's network. Most families never even realized they owned underground treasure until it was legally stolen from them. Property mineral rights law is deceptively complex. Surface ownership doesn't automatically include subsurface extraction rights, which can be bought, sold, or seized separately from the land itself. Most homeowners never check their deeds for mineral clauses. My property was the missing puzzle piece, the geographic keystone that would unlock legal access to mine an entire mountain ridge worth hundreds of millions in rare earth deposits. Frank's forensic accounting suddenly made perfect sense. Those $2 million Brenda had borrowed came from private investors betting on mining windfalls that required complete extraction corridor control. My refusal to sell wasn't just inconvenient, it was threatening to bankrupt her entire investment scheme. But here's where my grandfather's wisdom saved 3 generations. His 1963 deed included a perpetual family ownership clause. Legal language preventing property sales outside the family without unanimous heir consent. More importantly, it specifically retained all mineral rights in perpetuity for the Blackwood family line. B. Even if they somehow forced surface property sale, underground mineral rights would remain with my family forever. The conspiracy's scope crystallized like frost on winter windows. This wasn't random harassment, it was systematic wealth extraction targeting families who didn't understand what they owned. Elderly couples like Eleanor's husband, veterans like Tom Bradley who trusted official documents, single mothers overwhelmed by legal complexity. Every family had been separated from mineral rights worth millions, then watched their properties flip to Denver buyers while real treasure remained buried beneath, waiting for large-scale extraction permits already grinding through bureaucratic channels. But my security system had captured the smoking gun. Those late-night meetings with county commissioners weren't about building permits. Audio from perimeter cameras recorded conversations about fast-tracking federal mining applications and expediting environmental impact waivers. The criminal network included county officials, state regulators, and federal bureaucrats designed to strip mineral wealth from unsuspecting mountain families. I sat in that workshop where Grandpa had taught me to fix broken radios and broken hearts, surrounded by evidence of crimes that made Enron look like petty theft. Brenda's forged condemnation order was scheduled for Monday, but now I understood this wasn't about neighborhood aesthetics. This was about $50 million she thought I didn't know existed. Time to prove exactly how wrong she was about the Blackwood family's intelligence. Sunday morning, I converted my grandfather's workshop into a war room that would have made the Pentagon jealous, if the Pentagon specialized in taking down crooked HOA presidents with delusions of mining grandeur. Multiple computer monitors displayed property maps, financial records, and legal documents across every horizontal surface. Wall charts tracked the criminal conspiracy's participants like a spider web designed by someone with serious trust issues and access to government databases. The smell of strong coffee mixed with sawdust and electrical ozone as I worked through the night, fueled by righteous anger and the kind of focused determination that comes from finally understanding exactly what you're fighting and how much money was at stake. First priority, upgrading my cabin's security to fortress-level protection. If Brenda planned to serve that forged condemnation order Monday morning, she'd discover that breaking into my property had become significantly more challenging than breaking into Fort Knox's maximum security vacation home. The new electronic lock system was a masterpiece of paranoid engineering that would make government spooks weep with joy. The primary component was a military-grade electronic deadbolt with rolling encryption codes that changed every 30 seconds. Even if someone intercepted the signal, they'd have better luck solving calculus problems while blindfolded, drunk, and riding a unicycle. The biometric scanner combined fingerprint recognition with palm vein mapping, technology that required living tissue and couldn't be fooled by silicone copies, latex molds, or severed digits. Not that I expected Brenda's crew to get that creative, but my grandfather always said, plan for the worst-case scenario, then add 20% more paranoia and better locks. Electronic lock systems require professional installation for maximum security effectiveness. Improper mounting can create vulnerabilities that defeat even the best technology. The takeaway? Never skimp on professional installation when protecting valuable assets. For backup, I installed a mechanical lock that would challenge a master locksmith having his best day ever while hopped up on caffeine and professional pride. The key design was custom machined from hardened steel, with tolerances so tight that even professional lockpicking tools would surrender in frustration. The smartphone integration was my favorite feature. Real-time monitoring allowed me to operate the system from anywhere with cell coverage, logging every access attempt with timestamps and photos. If someone tried breaking in while I was buying groceries, I'd know about it before they finished saying, "What the hell just happened to my crowbar?" Perimeter security included motion sensors that triggered automated lighting and camera recording. Driveway pressure plates detected vehicle approaches and automatically logged license numbers through connected traffic cameras that Frank had helped me network with surprising technical skill for a retired accountant. The legal strategy required equally sophisticated coordination. Attorney Sarah Mendez worked with federal prosecutors who'd been tracking mountain property fraud patterns for months without the smoking gun evidence my documentation provided. FBI financial crimes investigators salivated over Frank's forensic accounting, which revealed $8.7 million in fraudulent transactions flowing through more shell companies than a money laundering convention. Multiple backup systems prevent single-point failures in security installations. Redundant power supplies, cellular backup communications, and offline storage ensure continuous protection even during sabotage attempts. Building the legal case required victim testimonials that would make juries understand the human cost of Brenda's greed. Eleanor Denver's kitchen table hosted strategy sessions where neighbors shared stories of intimidation, fraud, and forced sales. Each sworn affidavit added another brick to the legal wall we were constructing around Brenda's criminal enterprise. Tom Bradley's military intelligence background proved invaluable for mapping the conspiracy network. His Veterans Administration contacts helped identify other disabled veterans targeted through fake accessibility violations. The pattern was systematic, deliberate, and absolutely enraging. The technical honey trap was my personal masterpiece. I staged apparent vulnerability, temporary scaffolding suggesting repair work that would make the property appear unmonitored for exactly one night. Hidden cameras with military-grade night vision would capture anyone stupid enough to attempt break-in during the supposed security gap. Financial preparation meant liquidating assets to fund legal warfare, but crowdfunding for other victims had generated unexpected statewide support. Timing coordination was critical. Federal investigators needed 2 more weeks for bulletproof criminal charges, with class action filings scheduled to coincide with indictments for maximum media impact. As Sunday's sun set behind mountain peaks hiding $50 million in rare earth treasure, I stood in that workshop breathing air that tasted like impending victory. Tomorrow, Brenda would discover exactly how well prepared the Blackwood family could be when protecting what mattered most. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp mountain air that usually promised good fishing and peaceful reflection. Instead, it delivered Brenda's most desperate gambit yet, and proof that cornered criminals make increasingly stupid decisions. My security system's first alert came at 2:47 a.m. Motion detected at the cabin's northeast corner, infrared cameras capturing 3 figures approaching through the tree line like budget ninjas having their worst day ever. Rick Donovan led the expedition, armed with professional lock-picking tools, electronic signal jammers, and what appeared to be enough determination to break into a nuclear bunker. I watched the live feed from my truck parked half a mile down the mountain road, automatically live-streaming everything to cloud storage, while these geniuses provided evidence for multiple felony charges. The infrared footage was cinema-quality clear, Rick directing his crew to positions around my fortress-level electronic lock system. They tried everything. Signal jammers designed to disrupt electronic communications, useless against hardwired backup systems. Physical force that would have worked on standard residential locks but accomplished nothing against military-grade hardware except making impressive sparks. Lockpicks that might have succeeded on conventional mechanisms but couldn't even locate the custom keyway I'd designed. The biometric scanner's red denial light blinked like a mechanical middle finger every time they attempted to bypass it, with everything from latex gloves to severed chicken feet. Apparently Rick had watched too many spy movies and not enough electrical contractor training videos. But the audio recording was pure gold. Rick's frustration escalated from professional confidence to barely contained rage as my lock system resisted every attack method known to modern burglary. "This is impossible," he snarled, sweat dripping despite October mountain cold that made breath visible in puffs of defeated ambition. "No residential lock should be this secure." "Maybe we should abort," suggested one crew member, probably the same kid who'd blown the whistle on their previous crimes. "This feels federal-level serious." "Brenda's paying us $50,000 for this job," Rick snapped. "We're not leaving without those keys or proof this place is empty." $50,000 for breaking into my cabin. Either my property was more valuable than I'd realized, or Brenda's desperation had reached pathological levels. Then came the moment that transformed breaking and entering into attempted evidence planting. Rick's crew produced small plastic bags containing white powder, carefully placing them near my electrical panel and solar inverters, while discussing how to make this look natural. I immediately called FBI Special Agent Martinez, who'd been monitoring my situation as part of their broader mountain property fraud investigation. Federal agents coordinated response with local sheriff's department, arriving as Rick's crew scattered into forest like startled deer. Chain of custody was preserved for the planted evidence, which field testing revealed as methamphetamine. Professional-grade stuff, not amateur chemistry set production. These people weren't just planning to frame me, they were investing serious money in felony charges that would have triggered immediate property seizure under asset forfeiture laws. But Brenda's Monday morning offensive wasn't limited to criminal break-ins. At exactly 9 a.m. she arrived at Pine Ridge's emergency town hall meeting looking like righteous authority incarnate. Silver hair styled to perfection, designer suit projecting competence and concern, clipboard thick with fabricated documentation supporting her latest lies. The community center was packed with 43 residents who'd received urgent safety notices about my increasingly dangerous behavior. Brenda had spent the weekend spreading rumors about weapons stockpiling, threats against elderly neighbors, and unstable veteran syndrome that required immediate intervention. "This individual has crossed the line from eccentric to dangerous," Brenda announced, gesturing toward photos showing my security cameras and reinforced door. "We have documented evidence of threatening behavior and potential violence against community members." What she didn't know was that Frank Kowalski had spent Sunday coordinating with our network of supporting neighbors. Instead of finding a frightened audience ready to approve emergency action against me, Brenda discovered organized resistance. Tom Bradley stood up first, his veteran's bearing commanding immediate respect. "What documented evidence?" "Because I've seen Brenda's people trespassing, vandalizing property, and planting suspicious materials. The only dangerous behavior I've witnessed has come from her operation." Eleanor Denver rose next, her elderly voice carrying the weight of lived experience and bureaucratic fury. "This woman destroyed my family through fake violations and fabricated fees. She's a criminal who targets vulnerable people for profit." Sarah Mitchell, the elementary school teacher, produced a folder of her own. "I've been documenting Brenda's harassment for months. False septic inspections, fraudulent compliance demands, intimidation tactics designed to force property sales below market value." The tide turned faster than mountain weather. Neighbors who'd been intimidated into silence found courage in numbers, sharing stories of extortion, fraud, and systematic targeting that painted Brenda as the criminal she actually was. But the real surprise came when County Commissioner Janet Morse arrived unannounced with federal agents in tow. Turned out the FBI's investigation had finally reached the corruption network's governmental tentacles. "Brenda Hartwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, fraud, and bribery," announced Agent Martinez, handcuffs glinting under fluorescent lights while Brenda's perfect facade crumbled like cheap makeup in summer heat. The meeting ended with Brenda being perp-walked past the very neighbors she'd terrorized for years, while my security system's evidence provided real-time documentation of her criminal enterprise's final desperate moments. The arrest should have ended everything. But desperate criminals with millions at stake don't surrender quietly, and Brenda's network had more tricks than a magician's convention populated by people with serious ethical deficiencies. Tuesday morning brought news that made my coffee taste like liquid betrayal. Despite federal charges, Brenda had posted bond through some high-powered Denver attorney who specialized in white-collar criminals with more money than conscience. She was back on the street within 18 hours, probably planning her next move before the jail cell door had finished closing. That afternoon, corrupt County Commissioner Janet Morse issued an emergency health hazard order that would have been impressive if it wasn't completely fabricated. The document claimed my solar panels were leaking toxic materials into groundwater, threatening the entire mountain watershed with environmental catastrophe. The timing was surgical in its precision. Emergency orders bypass normal due process, allowing immediate property seizure pending environmental cleanup that could take months or years to resolve. By the time legal challenges worked through the system, my property would be stripped of mineral rights and transferred to shell companies controlled by Brenda's investors. But Janet had made one crucial mistake. She didn't know that FBI raids on county offices had happened simultaneously with Brenda's arrest. Computer servers were seized, financial records confiscated, and email communications between corrupt officials intercepted before they could be deleted by people who apparently never learned about federal data recovery capabilities. Sheriff's deputies arrived Wednesday morning looking apologetic about serving papers they knew were fraudulent. Deputy Rodriguez handed me the evacuation order with the expression of someone forced to deliver a birthday cake filled with nuclear waste. "Marcus, I'm required to serve this, but off the record. Environmental emergency my ass. Your water test's cleaner than most municipal supplies, and those solar panels are newer than my truck." The beautiful irony was watching federal coordination unfold in real time. While county officials tried implementing their emergency seizure, FBI agents were already in possession of communications proving the entire environmental crisis was manufactured using falsified scientific reports and bribed regulatory officials. Independent environmental testing I'd commissioned months earlier showed pristine water quality that made municipal supplies look contaminated. Solar panel documentation proved zero toxic materials. The panels were newer technology, cleaner than traditional electrical infrastructure. The emergency was about as legitimate as a $3 bill printed by someone who'd never seen actual currency. Legal team response was immediate and overwhelming. Federal injunction against county seizure was filed before lunch, backed by documented evidence of government corruption spanning multiple agencies. Environmental groups joined the fight, recognizing that illegal mining permits would destroy watershed areas critical to regional ecosystem stability. But Wednesday afternoon brought escalation that transformed property dispute into potential violence. Rick Donovan arrived at my cabin with 6 armed men, claiming legal authority to secure hazardous materials during environmental emergency procedures. The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with testosterone and barely controlled aggression as they positioned themselves around my property like an occupying army with delusions of legitimate authority. My electronic lock system's emergency protocol activated automatically, sirens wailing, strobe lights flashing, automatic emergency calls dispatching to FBI field office, state police, and sheriff's department simultaneously. The smartphone app allowed me to live stream the entire confrontation from my secure location half a mile away. Rick's crew attempted forced entry using everything from crowbars to portable angle grinders that threw sparks like angry fireflies against reinforced steel. The lock system withstood cutting tools, pry bars, and what appeared to be small explosive charges that accomplished nothing except making impressive noise and attracting federal attention. But the audio recording captured Rick's complete meltdown as his equipment failed against engineering that anticipated exactly this scenario. "This is impossible," he screamed into his phone, presumably talking to Brenda. "The lock won't break, the door won't budge, and half the county's responding to automatic alarm systems. What kind of security does this guy have?" "Military grade," I whispered to my phone screen, watching federal agents coordinate response from multiple agencies. The kind that anticipated desperate criminals making increasingly stupid decisions. The community rally was spontaneous and beautiful. Neighbors formed human chains blocking property access, while veterans groups arrived supporting Tom Bradley's testimony about systematic targeting. Environmental activists protested mining fraud with professionally printed signs that appeared faster than government response time. Media coverage reached national attention as the story escalated from local HOA dispute to federal corruption investigation involving mineral rights theft, spanning multiple counties. Rebecca Torres's investigative series had evolved into live television coverage that made Brenda's criminal enterprise impossible to ignore. The smoking gun came when Rick's frustration led to a phone conversation captured by perimeter audio surveillance. "Brenda, this isn't working," Rick shouted over power tool noise and federal sirens. "The guy's place is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. There's FBI everywhere, and that mineral rights documentation you said didn't exist? He's got copies of everything." "Then burn it down," came Brenda's voice through cell phone speakers. $50 million in mining rights is worth more than one cabin." Federal agents monitoring my live stream heard direct confession to conspiracy, arson planning, and admission of the mineral rights fraud that had destroyed multiple families. Game over. Thursday morning's emergency county meeting was standing room only, packed with media crews, federal agents, and enough evidence to sink a criminal enterprise that had terrorized mountain families for years. The community center buzzed with the kind of electric tension that comes when justice is about to be served with a side order of very public humiliation. I entered carrying my laptop loaded with 2 years of systematic documentation, security footage that would make Hollywood producers jealous, and audio recordings that captured confessions clearer than Sunday morning church bells. The giant projection screen at the front dominated the room like a technological judge waiting to deliver verdict. Brenda arrived with her expensive Denver attorney, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, possibly including federal prison, where the orange jumpsuits might clash less with her designer aesthetic than the public exposure about to unfold. She wore desperation disguised as righteous indignation, clutching fabricated documents like talismans that might somehow make reality disappear. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, connecting my laptop to the projection system, "today you're going to see exactly how a criminal enterprise masquerading as Homeowners Association Authority has been systematically stealing mountain properties and mineral rights worth hundreds of millions of dollars." The visual presentation began with before and after photos of my cabin, showing the fortress-like electronic lock system that had withstood everything Rick's crew could throw at it. Security footage montage revealed the entire conspiracy timeline: break-in attempts, evidence planting, intimidation tactics, all captured in high-definition detail that made denial impossible. "This isn't about property compliance or neighborhood aesthetics," I continued, clicking to financial records that Frank Kowalski's forensic accounting had assembled. "This is about an $8.7 million fraud scheme targeting families who didn't understand the value of what they owned." The room erupted in gasps as property records showed systematic mineral rights theft. Eleanor Denver's family cabin, purchased for $300,000 after fabricated septic violations, was now worth over $2 million in rare earth extraction rights. Tom Bradley's accessibility compliance harassment had separated him from mineral deposits valued at $5 million. But the moment that transformed murmurs into outrage came when I played audio recordings of Brenda's voice planning violence against me and other property owners. "If that lock doesn't come off, we'll make sure Miles doesn't either." Silence fell like a hammer blow. Federal Agent Martinez stepped forward from the back of the room where he'd been observing with the satisfaction of someone whose 2-year investigation was finally paying dividends. "Mrs. Hartwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, fraud, bribery, and now attempted arson and conspiracy to commit violence." The perp walk past 43 families she'd terrorized was poetry written in handcuffs and federal charges. Her attorney requested immediate private conference, probably calculating plea bargain options that might reduce federal prison time from decades to something merely life-destroying. Frank Kowalski took the microphone next, his forensic accounting presentation reducing complex financial crimes to terms a jury would understand. $2.3 million borrowed against future mining profits, shell companies controlling stolen mineral rights, county officials receiving $75,000 in consulting fees for expediting property seizures. Eleanor Denver stood up in the audience, her elderly voice carrying the weight of moral authority that comes from surviving bureaucratic evil. "My Harold died thinking he'd failed our family financially. This woman killed him with stress from fighting violations that never existed. She needs to pay for every family she destroyed." The technology demonstration was my personal favorite moment. Remote operation of my cabin's electronic lock from the community center drew amazed whispers as the smartphone app showed real-time security footage. Live video feed displayed the lock responding to commands from 20 miles away while I explained how preparation and proper documentation could defeat even sophisticated criminal enterprises. Tom Bradley's testimony about veteran targeting brought several audience members to tears. She specifically chose disabled veterans, elderly couples, single mothers, anyone she considered vulnerable. This wasn't random harassment. This was predatory criminal behavior designed to steal from people who couldn't fight back. The environmental crimes representative explained how illegal mining permits would have destroyed pristine watershed areas supporting wildlife migration routes used for thousands of years. $50 million in rare earth extraction would have poisoned water supplies serving 3 counties while destroying ecosystems that can't be replaced. Rick Donovan's confession played next, his video testimony from county jail where he'd agreed to cooperate for reduced sentences. Brenda planned the whole thing. target vulnerable families, manufacture violations, force sales below market value, strip mineral rights, flip properties to Denver buyers. We destroyed dozens of families for mining profits. The mic drop moment came when I displayed my grandfather's original deed with its perpetual family ownership clause and retained mineral rights provision. "She spent 5 years stealing from families who didn't know what they owned," I said, savoring the moment like fine wine aged in justice barrels. "But she picked the wrong family to steal from. My grandfather was smarter than her entire criminal network combined, and his foresight just sent her to federal prison." And standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes, while federal agents escorted additional co-conspirators from the building. Justice served with a technology garnish and a side order of very public vindication. 6 months later, justice had been served with the kind of precision that would make Swiss watchmakers jealous, and with sentences that ensured Brenda's criminal enterprise would never threaten another mountain family. Federal court delivered verdicts that restored faith in the legal system's ability to protect people from bureaucratic predators. Brenda received 12 years for racketeering, with additional charges for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted violence. Rick Donovan got 7 years for his role in break-ins, evidence planting, and intimidation campaigns. Corrupt County Commissioner Janet Morse earned 5 years for bribery and facilitating government fraud that had destroyed multiple families. The restitution fund exceeded $4.2 million, returning stolen wealth to 43 families who'd lost properties through manufactured violations and fabricated compliance demands. Eleanor Denver used her settlement to establish a scholarship program for children whose families had been targeted by Brenda's schemes. Tom Bradley's veteran advocacy organization received funding to help disabled veterans facing similar property rights violations across Colorado. Property restoration happened faster than bureaucratic wheels usually turn. Illegal mining permits were permanently revoked by federal court order, while environmental protection status granted to the entire watershed area ensured that pristine mountain streams would remain protected from corporate exploitation. My cabin became a symbol of resistance against institutional corruption, with security professionals and journalists making regular pilgrimages to see the legendary lock system that had withstood professional criminal attacks. The technology legacy exceeded my wildest expectations. My electronic lock design was licensed to security companies nationwide, with royalties funding legal aid programs for rural property owners facing harassment. DIY installation guides published online helped families protect themselves from similar schemes. The security industry recognized the innovation as breakthrough protection for isolated properties where response times made traditional alarms inadequate. But the real transformation was community healing that emerged from shared resistance to organized crime. New county commissioners were elected on transparency platforms, with reformed HOA regulations preventing future fraud. Victim support groups helped families rebuild confidence in local institutions while maintaining vigilance against corruption. Financial recovery restored property values that had been artificially suppressed by Brenda's systematic harassment. Insurance companies reimbursed legitimate claims while implementing fraud detection protocols designed to prevent manufactured emergencies. Tourism increased as the corruption story became regional legend, with visitors wanting to see the mountain community that had successfully fought back against criminal enterprise. My consulting business grew beyond anything I'd imagined. Rural property owners from across the western states sought advice on security systems, legal documentation, and fraud prevention. Congressional testimony led to federal legislation protecting mineral rights inheritance and strengthening penalties for government officials who facilitate property theft. The book deal happened naturally. Publishers recognized that the lock that saved my legacy represented something deeper than personal victory. It was proof that ordinary people could defeat sophisticated criminal conspiracies through preparation, documentation, and community solidarity. Frank Kowalski's forensic accounting firm specialized in detecting property fraud schemes, providing pro bono services for elderly and veteran victims while training rural law enforcement to recognize systematic targeting. Eleanor Denver's legal clinic offered free services for property rights cases, with education seminars teaching families how to protect inherited wealth from bureaucratic predators. The positive social initiative closest to my heart was the Mountain Heritage Protection Fund that grew from our successful resistance. Scholarships for children of targeted families, legal aid for rural property owners facing fraud, environmental conservation grants for watershed protection, all funded by mineral rights royalties that Brenda had tried to steal. Annual Heritage Protection Day celebrations brought together families who'd survived targeting, with educational booths teaching fraud prevention and fundraising for ongoing legal aid efforts. My demonstration of the famous lock system always drew crowds, but the real victory was community resilience that had emerged from shared struggle. The cabin today preserves Grandpa's vision while incorporating modern security that protected 3 generations of family legacy. Weekend retreats for family gatherings, educational tours for security professionals, and quiet reflection in the workshop where resistance had been planned. All reminders that sometimes standing up to bullies requires both courage and really good locks. The final twist that still makes me smile came in a letter from Grandpa's attorney, revealing a hidden safe deposit box containing additional mineral rights documentation. The property's true value, $80 million in rare earth deposits that I donated to Environmental Conservation Trust, ensuring the land would remain protected forever.